Welcome to this edition of Morgan You Asked For podcast, January 22nd, about 9 o'clock on a Wednesday. The Hawks scored at halftime here, got it on here. The Hawkeye women are up 50-26 over Washington. Impressive showing of offense considering I believe they only scored 49 points last game total, right?
Yeah, it was 49 points. They've really been on the struggle bus. So it's a breaking point in the season. They've got to start getting some W's racked up because they're on their way to the NIT right now. So they they got to get some wins going here. And a good first half for the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, and then Iowa State women tonight did beat BYU pretty handily. They were up by around 20. I don't know if it finished there, but around 20 most of the game. So as of right now, good night for the women, who's both of them have struggled a little bit compared to maybe what expectations were and just what everybody thought they would be, maybe a little bit. Let's move on to, the story of the hour, the story of the week, story of the month, the NFL playoffs. Last weekend with the 4 games, is that the best weekend, or is it this upcoming weekend what it truly is to go to the Super Bowl? The only problem with this weekend, there is only 2 games. It's just Sunday, but last weekend, 2 games, both days, all NFL, all pretty good games. They weren't all just great games, but pretty good games, ending with obviously the best game of the weekend, the most competitive game, and the one that they thought would be the best. And Lamar and Josh Allen did not disappoint. Ravens and Bills just do what they do. They're really, really good. And the Bills got that one, and now they're going to get their chance to go take down the Chiefs again.
Yeah, for me, this weekend's the best weekend because everything's on the line. I know there's more games. Some people like divisional weekend the best. I like championship weekend just because of, like I said, the stakes. If you win, you go to the Super Bowl. If you lose, it's about as devastating as it gets, in my opinion, for the fans. I've been on the right end and the wrong end as a Packers fan and Brett Favre fan with the Vikings a few times. So to me, this is the best weekend. But all the games were really, all the games were pretty good. There was some drama in each of them, plenty of storylines. If we just want to kind of go in order, we could start with the Chiefs and the refs and that whole mess. But everyone's complained about the refs. It was just a couple calls and then a non-call because Mahomes flopped and people were upset about that. But the Texans played a pretty terrible game, giving up all those sacks, the special teams blunders, the opening play of the game. Guy takes his helmet off, thought he made a great play. He didn't, then goes and pushes his coach. I mean, when teams play the Chiefs, they're just not buttoned up or they lose their minds in a way. It's what it seems like. So regardless of those calls, I think the Chiefs were still going to win that game either way.
Yeah, the Chiefs, and you're 100% right. The Chiefs right now in the situation where they don't have to do anything outstanding. I mean, unfortunately, they're like the Patriots 10 years ago, where other teams feel like they have to do so much more to beat them that most teams can't handle it. And they freak, like you just said, they freak out. They do things that are abnormal for their team. Now, teams are starting to go for it more, but teams go for a 4th down maybe when they shouldn't because they think they have to score a touchdown. Now, the Chiefs are a much different team than they were 3 years ago where you did feel like you had to outscore them. This is not that team, but you try to almost do too much. You just have to play a good football game. The Chiefs are not so much better than everybody else like a couple years ago. I think a couple years ago, they were just better than everybody else. I don't think that is the case. Now, they have the best quarterback, they have the best coach, and then those 2 guys make everybody around them. And as long as the mistakes aren't made, they're going to win every game. But you just can't make the simple mistakes. Mistakes happen in football. That's really what, if you break down football, it's when the ball is snapped, it's a series of 11 people making mistakes, and who makes the least mistakes. I mean, that's the game of football in a nutshell. And right now, the Chiefs have an eraser in Patrick Mahomes, and Josh Allen is that way. Lamar Jackson is that way. Jalen Hurts is that way if he's healthy, which we're going to talk about that, but that's a big question mark. And then Jaden Daniels is very much that way. So the 4 quarterbacks that are left can erase mistakes as good as anybody in the league, and that's why those teams are still playing.
Yeah, for the Chiefs, I mean, we've joked about it before. Their season officially has begun. This past weekend, that was their last preseason game. The Chiefs' season's only 2 games long. Everybody else plays 17 to 21 games. So here they are, 7 straight AFC Championship games. The Arrowhead Invitational, as Nick Wright likes to call it. But I do agree.
Unfortunately, he's right.
Yeah,
someone else just needs to win games.
Troy Aikman was right on that call, though. They've got to get some of these penalties cleaned up, and the roughing the passer. My biggest thing is, there was a couple that were questionable, and they do have to get that fixed. But that wasn't the reason the Texans lost. And I almost wonder going into next season if the NFL can look at a rule where each team gets 1 reviewable call a game on a quarterback hit if there's a penalty. And if you lose the call, if it's not overturned, you don't lose a timeout, but every team gets 1 of those where they can go back and look. Now, I know that slows the game up a little bit, so that is an issue that the NFL doesn't want to have. They want to keep the games going at a reasonably fast pace. But no, that's not the reason the Texans lost, though, at the end of the day.
No, I mean, by the letter of the law, the one where he went high and got him, that was a correct call. Now, we can all make the argument where I don't think it's roughing the passer as just in general sense of what we all think of roughing the passer. But by the letter of the law, that was correct. Now, the one where here's what happens more than anything on those plays. If you look, did they hit Mahomes? Probably. But those 2 guys hit each other way harder than they hit Mahomes. And that happens a lot. And I watch a lot of football, college and the NFL. And I don't know, the NFL doesn't have the targeting rule like college does, but the amount of times that people hit heads in football, maybe I'm just noticing it more. It's all the time, and especially the NFL. I mean, those running backs, they just lead with their head and they just go. And I know they don't have the targeting, but if you want to start calling head shots, then let's start calling head shots. I don't care if it's quarterback, anything. If you're going to call headshots, let's call headshots. That's my argument with football right now. If you don't want to call them, don't call them. I'm okay with that too. But if we're going to call them, let's call them on everybody. And yes, Mahomes is the number 1 guy, but when Lamar runs, he gets hit. It's not a penalty. When Josh Allen runs, he doesn't get the penalties. Mahomes is really no different than them, except for just the name. It's becoming a situation, and the NFL overall doesn't want it. They want Mahomes, and I understand that the NFL can't have all the quarterbacks out. They have to have their guys in, or it doesn't work. But it's becoming an issue, and it's becoming almost funny and just too much of a joke for it to be not a little bit real.
Yeah, the NFL knows what's going on. They see it. It's a little over the top. So I'll be interested to see how they call the Chiefs and the Bills game, if they're going to let a lot of stuff go or if it's going to be call after call for both sides. Hopefully it's an evenly called game. I mean, that's what we all want. Right. And you're right. There is a lot of helmet dropping in football, especially the NFL. The running backs are the last position that they aren't protected anymore. And I think a lot of it's tough for defenders because you're not supposed to go helmet to helmet, but you don't want to go at people's knees either.
Right.
And it makes tackling a little bit difficult, especially when it's bang, bang or it's a speed play. So I've noticed that too. You do see a lot of helmets dropping more than you'd like to see, just because obviously that's dangerous for the player dropping the helmet and all those type of things. But I've kind of noticed that too. It seems like there is a lot more just the helmet drops.
And I do think you made the point that I think the players have made a conscious effort with the technology of the helmet and everything. They would rather hit each other in the head than take out someone's knee, because that's, I mean, I do think that they are just they do not want that soft tissue injuries, because those are just so tough. And that ends your career more than a headshot, unfortunately. You tear your knee up bad, sometimes you are never the same.
Yeah, thankfully, I mean, ACLs, MCLs, they're not as bad as they used to be. They used to be if you tore your ACL, I mean, you, especially a running back or receiver, you didn't know if you were coming back. Guys are coming back a lot better now than they used to, but
Yep.
it still is. I mean, you're still out an extended period of time, and in some cases, some guys are never the same. So yeah, I think a lot of players would just rather go high to low, and if it's helmet to helmet, so be it. But at least they're not taking someone's knee out that they know or ending their season for 6, 8, 10 months.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you look at Tank, the Houston receiver that got hurt there in Kansas City week 16, 17, whatever it was. I mean, he tore it all, and it's going to be a while. And if he ever comes back the same, it could be, I'll question it, the way he tore all that up. And that wasn't even that was just an accident. Mm-hmm. His own guy got him, and that's unfortunate. But that's what happens when helmets hit legs. And when helmets hit helmets, you don't get that.
Yeah, it's tough for defenders. College, I hate the college rules too. I hate the guys get kicked out for a game because college. Some of these guys, their careers are pretty short. I mean, missing a game, that's could be 1/10 of their season. They play 11 or 12 games, but you get the point. I mean, missing an entire game is a big deal. So yeah, I don't like the college does that, but the NFL, getting back to Mahomes, they're hearing it, they see everything. So, like I said, I'd be interested to see how they call this next game for the Chiefs and Bills.
I think there's going to be some changes. There has to be, because it's now. The problem too is everybody's becoming so much smarter. Where you have the Kenny Pickett rule, where remember when he was in college and went to slide, and then didn't, and that's wrong too. I mean, I understand what he was doing, and it's a great play, and I love it. But if you're going to kick kids out and you're going to give them a penalty for every little hit, then once you start or initiate, you're giving it up. You cannot let him get back in and get 3 more yards or 5 more yards or whatever.
Yeah, Mahomes has taken advantage of that the past couple of years, where he'll run to the sideline, he'll hold the ball out like he does, or do any of these crazy stuff that he does, and then he'll cut it back and get 5, 8 extra yards. And it's smart on him. I don't blame him. I mean, he can get away with it. He should. I don't blame the guy. But it's just another obstacle that makes it tough for people to play defense nowadays.
I mean, every rule is just against the defense, and that's what we want as viewers. It's what, and who was I listening to? And they were just saying that defensive coaches who was it? I can't remember who I was listening to. That's why defensive coaches in today's world have a hard time being a head coach, because they live in a different world than offense. They don't understand, just what it takes, and they just can't relate with the offense as well as an offensive guy can relate with defense for some reason better. And unfortunately, growing up as a defensive, I mean, I think it was Brady and Gronk said that, Belichick didn't have any clue what was going on offense. No clue. If people asked him, he would not have known anything they were doing. It was McDaniels and Bill O'Brien, and obviously different guys through the years. But when you have 2 of the best at their position ever saying that their best head coach ever didn't have a clue what they were doing on offense, that's telling. The defensive guys just have a hard time switching over to offense, and I understand it. The offensive language and what those guys learn every week and every playbook and every offensive coordinator, it is a foreign language. It truly is. And that's why you find some coaches that just, that backup or that third string guy just goes with a coach. He at least knows it, and he can help the other guys. And he's learned that language. And I mean, I would say Seneca Wallace was a little bit like that with Mike Holmgren. He must have known it. He was very versatile. He could help people out, and he just followed him from Seattle to Green Bay to Cleveland. I mean, he just went with him everywhere he was.
Yeah, with Belichick, there's a lot of stories that, he wasn't involved with the offense, which is fine. I mean, it worked. Yeah. It worked for a lot of years. And then, his drafting toward the end wasn't very good, especially on the offensive skill position players. But, yeah, defense is tough because defense is about flying around, pursuit and tackle, the basics. Offense is a little bit more choreographed. You got people cutting off routes here and there. You got blocking assignments. Defense is a lot of just blowing stuff up for the most part. I know it's a little more complicated than that, but yeah, there is a little barrier there, which can make it kind of tough. But, like I said, hopefully the NFL, I just hope there isn't a bunch of terrible calls in this Bills and Chiefs game. That nobody wants to see that.
No, it's Allen has never beaten Mahomes in January. Mahomes has only lost in the playoffs to Burrow and then Brady twice, correct?
I believe that's correct, yep.
And Brady was in overtime in the playoffs with the Patriots and then lost in the Super Bowl, not in overtime, kind of a blowout fashion, actually. And then Burrow beat him on a last-second field goal. So his AFC championships, every one of them have been in Arrowhead, correct? No, last year was not.
First one was not last year.
But so his two losses in AFC championship game, overtime, where if I remember correctly, he didn't touch the ball, right?
Yeah, they stopped the Patriots, and then one of the defensive players jumped off sides. It was a hard count, I think. If I remember, I could have that a little bit mistaken, but there was something like that happened. The Patriots went on to win, and then, of course, the Bengals lost to Burrow.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, it's just he's just really been unstoppable, and until he. Now, obviously, we're not Chiefs fans, but now that we're so close, do you want to see the Chiefs get 3 in a row?
I'm fine with the Chiefs getting 3 in a row just because it's going to piss everybody off. So, but I want Josh Allen to get a Super Bowl before he retires. I think it'd be a shame if we look back in his career when he's retired and he doesn't have a ring. So whoever wins this game, I'm going to be happy with. I would love for the Bills to win, for Josh Allen to have a chance to get a Super Bowl. But if the Chiefs do win, I'm going to enjoy it because it's just going to tick everybody off on the internet, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, I don't have any rooting interest in any of the teams left. I find it, I'm kind of with you. I like to see the Chiefs lose, but if they win, let's go and let's just set all the records and let's just hear everybody whine about Mahomes and Kelsey.
Yep, and then Taylor Swift will be there, and Caitlin Clark now, and it's everybody's getting more and more upset by the minute. So I actually enjoy that. I like seeing people upset, especially when there's a dynasty. The dynasties are more buttoned up than your team typically. That's the reason they're winning. It's not because of these calls, but the calls do need to get fixed up, obviously. And then, I think as we move on, which was the Lions and the Commanders game, just a couple quick thoughts. Jaden Daniels, best rookie quarterback ever. I'm pretty confident in that from what we've seen. And then obviously Goff and the defense played terrible. We all know that. I think something that nobody's talking about and something that really made me pretty angry early in the game, and I was texting a friend that's a Lions fan. It was Lions were up 7-3, and it was a play before Jared Goff fumbled. They ran it to Montgomery. He got a few yards, set up 3rd and short, and I texted him. I said, keep running the ball. They can't stop it. They break the huddle. I see they're in 4 wide. All of a sudden, Montgomery goes out 5 wide, and I'm thinking, this has got sack written all over it. Well, I wish it would have been a sack because it ends up being a fumble. And Ben Johnson, I think, fell into a trap that a lot of offensive coordinators do. You got all these tools in the tool bag, and sometimes you just need one tool to get the job done. I think they should have been running Gibbs left and right. If you take away Gibbs' longest run of the game, which was 33 yards, he was averaging 5.5 yards a carry. They should have ran him into the ground in that game, in my opinion. Keep your defense off the field. Keep their offense off the field as much as you can. And I've seen it happen a lot of times in big games where some of these offensive coordinators get a little pass happy. And it's understandable because they got all the weapons everywhere, but I thought it was a mistake not to run Gibbs more. I mean, I think there's an argument that Jahmyr Gibbs was the best football player on that field, and I think he goes into next year as a top 10 player overall.
I'm 100% with you. I mean, Steve Sarkisian got into it with Texas. They had first and goal from the 1 yard line and now he ran it, but he just go forward. They snap it 6 yards back and they try to go wide. Josh Allen, the teams that are left, when it's 4th and 2, 3rd and 2, they make no bones about it. It's the tush push or whatever, brotherly shove, whatever you want to call it. Josh Allen does it now. The Ravens did it a little differently because they didn't want to have Lamar do it, so they brought in Mark Andrews to do it, but it's the same play. And if your team's not good enough to get 2 yards on 2 sneaks on 3rd and 2 and then 4th and 1 or whatever, then you turn it over on downs and you live to play another day. But bad things usually aren't going to happen. I mean, more times than not, you're going to get it. If you look at the analytics, there's some analytics that say you should never, ever punt, ever. Just because the odds are that you will even get it on 4th and 8 more than the average, than punting it and the other team scoring. There's some numbers that suggest that.
Yeah, and the Lions, we know, go for it all the time. And again, that was 3rd and short. So I know what Ben Johnson was thinking. Well, if it's incomplete, then we'll run it. Right. I just thought, I wasn't thinking fumble at that time, but I was thinking sack. But like I said, I wish it would have been a sack because they would have kept the ball and had a chance at a field goal. But yeah, I would have ran it there. And late in the 3rd, going in the 4th quarter, I understand. Then you have to pick up the passing, because the game's getting toward the end. But I thought it was he didn't adjust in real time. And I thought if they would have just milked the clock as much as possible and ran Jahmyr Gibbs into the ground, I think they would have had a better chance to win the game. But, the flip side is you got to give Washington a lot of credit. They go from the 2nd overall pick in the draft to 1 game away from the Super Bowl. And that's what happens when, there's more than just the coach and the quarterback, but those are the 2 main things that can flip a franchise around.
Well, you look at Houston was in that same situation last year. Now they fell in the division round, but they were saying new coach, new quarterback, and things just clicked. It's the same way. Now, kind of getting on this, Ben Johnson got hired by the Bears. I like it. But the other guy that I really was intrigued about, and I don't know if it would have happened or if they would have, but I would have liked Cliff Kingsbury in Chicago. Mm-hmm. Just because, one, he's been a head coach. He's been successful. People forget that he was Mahomes' college coach. So Mahomes learned something from him. Now, obviously, Andy Reid has put it on even a different level, which is what you should do. But Mahomes, he sat 1 year in the NFL and then came in and was really good right away. And I think Andy Reid knew it and knew that he just needed Alex Smith for 1 year, and that was the play. But what Kingsbury's done for Jaden Daniels, and you look at the difference in the offense today than it was in September. It was baby steps. It was quick hitters, easy. Probably the terminology and everything was very simple, remedial, use it that way. And now we're getting into 200, 300, 400 level class because he's got the whole tool. And then 1, he just learns. And then 2, he just gets better. And then he's just really good too. And it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, Jaden Daniels as a rookie, unbelievable. I will hopefully Ben Johnson can get the most out of Caleb Williams because I think has the potential to be just as good as Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, the talent's there. And one thing on Jaden Daniels before we move on, people talk about all the time what happens when the pocket collapses around you. You step up in the pocket and complete passes. I think something that goes untalked about a lot is when you have a clean pocket and you stay there, you don't run into a sack. You stay confident in the pocket, and he did that in the Lions game. He just stood there. The Lions pass rush couldn't get to him, and he didn't panic and just start running around.
Right.
Jared Goff has a little bit of that where, gets about right at that 3-second mark, and he starts getting happy feet, as I call it. He kind of starts bouncing around because he knows the pressure is going to be getting there sooner than later. It's tough to stay in the pocket a lot of times, too, when it's clean. And I thought Jaden Daniels done a great job of that, something that really doesn't get talked about. As far as Ben Johnson goes, McCarthy was probably the safer hire. It wouldn't have been a disaster. Ben Johnson gives you the highest ceiling.
Right.
We'll see what happens. He'll definitely get – I think he's going to get the best out of Caleb Williams, whatever that may be.
Which is what you had to have. You had to do that if you were the Bears. And I think McCarthy would have been fine because people do forget he won a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. He knows how to coach quarterbacks. I mean, Dak Prescott was pretty good under McCarthy. I mean, you can argue win the big game, whatever, but Dak Prescott was really good, and they paid him a lot of money because he was really good. And Dak owes McCarthy a lot of that money.
Yeah, Dak had some of his best seasons under McCarthy. Right. I mean, I think he finished third in the MVP voting a couple years ago, whatever it was. So, yeah, McCarthy would have been a safe pick, but I like it. I mean, it's the Bears, so we'll see how it
and it does sound like that's where Ben Johnson wanted to go, too. I mean, deep down, who knows? But as quick as it happened, as soon as, the Lions lost, I would have to say that when he went to have the in-person interview, it was very much, it's your job. If you want it, you want it. And he said yes. I mean, I would pretty much say that's what it was because they did the virtual interview in that initial week off. And, let's just kind of transition. Aaron Glenn, the D coordinator, got a new job too. How much of a factor do you think the two coordinators trying to get head jobs, both of them first-time head jobs, how big of influence did possibly that have on the Lions not playing very good? I think it does have something to do with it.
Yeah, it's not ideal.
You can't help but take your mind off of what you're supposed to do a little bit. It's human nature, and Dan Campbell and those players want those guys to get head jobs. I mean, no one's mad about it. But it's just the reality of the situation. And again, that's probably the one part of the calendar that needs to be fixed in the NFL. They got the calendar about perfect, way better in college. But somehow we got to figure out a little bit with the hiring. And they shouldn't be in such a big hurry to hire because they don't have the recruiting that happens and everything. Nothing happens until free agency, till after the Super Bowl. So no one has to make a hire real quick. They want to because they want to energize everybody. But I would like to see that rule a little bit where you're, maybe all the hirings after the NFC Championship game or even after the Super Bowl for 2 weeks, or at least wait until your season's over. You can't do it until your season's over. So then most coaches that get hired off, coordinators that get hired are the teams that are really good. So it's just not going to happen. If that's who you want to talk to, you're not going to make the hire until you get to talk to them until they're done anyway.
Yeah. In a perfect world, no coaches would be hired until after the Super Bowl's over. Right. That way the teams can stay focused and all these things. Or as you mentioned, until your team is eliminated, then you can start interviewing. That kind of changes the time frame, though. With the bad teams, they get a head start. But you're right. That's one of the few areas where the NFL, their calendars, it's not ideal. And I'm sure they're going to look into that too. I know you asked before we got started, how's it going to affect the Lions losing both their coordinators? I'm not that concerned about it. I think they've got a good staff in place. They've got their GM and coach in place. They've got all their core players are under contract. By the way, they picked up 2 third-round picks for Aaron Glenn getting hired by the Jets. So they're going to get a couple thirds there.
And that was because he is a minority, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you lose a minority to a advanced position, you get supplemental draft picks, correct? Is that what that something to that effect? Mm-hmm. Like when they lost Ben Johnson, they don't get anything from the NFL. But Aaron Glenn, they do.
Aaron Glenn, they do. So that's good. I think they're in the top 10 in cap space for next year. So, they're in a good spot. I took a picture of this earlier. One thing that worries me more than losing the coordinators, because like I said, they've got their right players in place. They play a first place schedule next year.
Yes.
Now the schedule's not set, but they've obviously got, and I'm just going to go the away games here. They've got their divisional games like everybody does. Then they're at Washington, at Philly, at Cincinnati, at Baltimore, at Kansas City, at the Rams.
That's not good.
That's tough. Right now that's
is that what happened to the 49ers? You think a little now, obviously injuries had a lot to do with that, but they had a first place schedule 2 years in a row. And that's one of those things where the teams that lose the Super Bowl, historically don't do very good. That's the reason. They lose one guy, two guys, they lose a coordinator, and things maybe aren't clicking right from the start. And then all of a sudden you lose a game maybe you're not supposed to. And now you got to go to the Rams and to the Bills. And all of a sudden one loss turns into three, and then spiraling happens.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I think for the Lions, I think they have a chance to have a worse record next year, but to be better going into the playoffs if they make the playoffs because they'd be healthy. I think that was another part of
it. Caught up to them. Yep,
it did.
Absolutely.
It did. And Goff played terrible, and the injuries caught up to him. Like I said, I was talking to my friend who's a Lions fan, and he bet a good amount of money on Washington, and I did too because I had to start hedging my bets before the season starts. I always do the Super Bowl bets. You get them like 80 to 150 to 1. So I had Lions versus Chiefs and Lions versus Bills, and then I had Rams versus Chiefs and Rams versus Bills.
Yeah, so you did have to hedge to make sure you had some money. Yeah.
So I put a good amount of money on the spread with Washington, and then I put a little bit on money line. So I turned out okay as far as betting goes. But yeah, the injuries caught up to the Lions. But if they go 11-6 next year, but they're healthy, they may be a better team in the playoffs than they would have been. Obviously this playoff run.
Yeah, Gibbs, you're 100% right in saying best player in the field, should have just ran him into the ground, and he had a great game. Don't kid yourself. And he's had a great season. But when those two, when Montgomery and him are healthy, that is very, very lethal.
Mm-hmm.
And Montgomery obviously was back, but he wasn't. You could tell he wasn't 100%.
No, and he was trying. But when he's healthy, and you need that 1-2 punch because the season's getting longer. That's great that they have both those guys. I just the last few games of the regular season, and then in that game, Jahmyr Gibbs he's unstoppable. I would have given him the ball at least 5 to 10 more times. I think he only ran the ball 14 times. He had 6 catches. Yeah. I would have tried to push toward 30 touches in that game for him because
games like that. But you got to go with it. But yeah, then they got behind, and then you have to start doing different things. But at that one situation you're talking about, 100%.
Yeah, you kind of get into panic mode even if you're only down one score, maybe 10 points, because your defense can't stop anybody. But it's tough to do. But if you can keep a level head about it and just stick to the run, you can work yourself back into it. But they've been in some shootouts all year. They have the weapons to do it. It was a bad day to have a bad day, especially for Jared Goff. That fumble, the interception before half, and then of course a pick six. That's at least 13 points minimum off the board, potentially 21. So it was just it sucked. But even if they'd won that game, I don't know if they could have gone another game versus Philly or the Rams and kept that defense together.
Yeah, let's just go to that game, Philly and the Rams. Really, Saquon had 200 yards. Now, he did have 205 yards wherever he had, but he had 70-some yards essentially when it was over. It truly sealed it, the big run there towards the end. But the question mark, they're really good. I like Philly. They do a lot of things really well, but I do think Hurts is hurt.
He's always hurt.
He is, but I think I don't think this is just normal. If he can't move and they can't run it as well with Saquon, Washington has a real chance here. and I think they have a chance anyway. But I think it did not look good when Hurts went down, and that knee didn't look good. He grabbed it right away, and he knew it. He's tough. I mean, I'll give him that. He's always played hurt. I mean, he's always, like you said, he's always hurt. It's kind of like Lipsy for Iowa State basketball. If you ever watch, he's just kind of always hurt, banged up, everything. And I do think that goes into Washington's hands. And you got to go back to Washington. They did the exact opposite of what the Bears. That Hail Mary that happened in Washington that night was a switch for both teams. The Bears win that game. Who knows what happens to the Bears, and who knows what happens to Washington. But that was just such a switch in the NFL and changed the fortunes of two teams and two franchises and this season forever.
Yeah, the seasons couldn't have gone any more differently for both those teams after that play. That's exactly right. I mean, getting to that Rams game, I mean, first of all, Saquon's been worth every dollar. And then second of all, when Stafford got that ball back at the end, he completes that long pass down the sideline. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you and everybody else thought they're one or two plays away from winning this thing, and they should have had no chance to do that in that game. I mean, that would have been an all-time comeback or an all-time blunder by the Eagles, but they pulled it out. Their best players, two of their defensive backs, I think it was, made great plays on 2 of the 4 downs. The fourth down, Stafford was just way off. It's snowing. That happens, unfortunately. But Saquon's been worth every dollar. Hurts is always banged up, but I agree with you. That injury did look pretty bad. And he's a weird quarterback anyway. He's not an elite passer. I don't even know if he's average. But he's such a good runner. And
he just wins. He won in high school. He won at Alabama. He won at Oklahoma. He's won in Philly. I mean, he just wins everywhere he's been. I'd love to see his overall record as a starting quarterback from the time he Pee-wee football to today. It's got to be over 75%, doesn't it?
Yeah, it probably is. I mean, you're right. He's
a winner. NFL. I mean, he won a Super Bowl. I mean, or been to a Super. He didn't win the Super. He'd been to a Super Bowl, and now back to the championship game. And here's my question: the Giants or whatever. How does that GM still have a job after letting Saquon go? And John Mara knew it, and we all watched it on, whatever that show's called, Hard Knocks. He did not. He goes, "Are you sure?" He goes, "I'm going to be sick when he goes to Eagles." He knew it. And then the worst thing is they bring up where his son said you should trade up whatever to get Jaden Daniels. So you got the owner questioning you, and then you got your own son saying you should go get Daniels. Both things would have been better than what they did.
Yeah, I think for the Giants, it's just a classic case that the Mara family didn't want to go through another process again.
Right.
Because it feels like every 2.5 to 3 years they're doing this. So it's going to be tough for those guys to even keep their jobs because it's not a great quarterback draft. 2 might go ahead of them potentially in the draft because they're sitting at 3. They're in a weird spot. Another thing is how's Jerry Jones feeling right now because Washington and Philly aren't going anywhere. They may be in third place for a few years now. Mike McCarthy, I think Jerry Jones thought he was going to get him back on a 3-year deal.
Right.
And it sounds like McCarthy wanted a 5-year deal and said, see ya. We saw Ben Johnson last year turn down the Washington job. Mike McCarthy said, I'll leave and go elsewhere. And then Cohen for Tampa Bay turned down the Jags job. And then the Jags GM just got fired earlier today, Trent Baalke. So
because someone said that they didn't want to work. I mean, I think the guy said he didn't want to work for him.
Yeah, coaches are starting to get a little bit more picky now, which I think is smart. If you have that opportunity now, a lot of coaches, you only get one maybe in a lifetime, so you kind of have to take it. But coaches are kind of starting to turn teams down now, which I think is good. That's sending a message to ownership. Make sure to have your house in order. We don't want to go to a chaotic franchise necessarily. Coaches aren't as desperate as they used to be. So, yeah, that division.
And that has to do with money, too. Ben Johnson was making like $6.5–7 million with Detroit. Now he's making 13. Now that's way more. I mean, but you can live one heck of a life being a coordinator at $6 to $7 million a year. used to be you had to be the head guy. Just college is the same way. Chip Kelly is making almost just as much money as because UCLA was not paying him just a ton of money. I think it was like $4 million, $5 million at UCLA, getting like 2.5 or 3 Ohio State with way less headache. And he won a national championship. So
yeah,
I think some people are understanding that now the NFL head job has not changed like just in the last 10 years. A college head job it is a different job today than it was 5 years ago. And people are understanding that.
Yeah, Ben Johnson was making a lot of money. I think Detroit gave him a pretty big bump in pay last year to stay. So, yeah, the coordinator's making a lot more. All the coaching stuff, it's a little bit different now than it used to be. But yeah, as far as Philadelphia goes, they were the better team in that one. That was a fun game to watch with the snow. I've been hearing, I don't know what's going on lately. I'm hearing a lot of people say they don't really enjoy watching these snow games, and I like watching them. I enjoy a good snow game from time to time.
Well, I just like the game being in the elements. You have to build you have to know this, and you can't. I mean, it's why Miami can't figure it out because, unfortunately, Tua's not going to win in the cold. He's from Hawaii, played at Alabama, and now at Miami. He's just never dealt with it. It's not his fault. He's never had to deal with it except for a handful of games in the NFL. And that was some of the thing, watching Buffalo and watching the game in Philly. Those, if that game was happening in college football, that game's in Atlanta, which obviously it's in a dome, but right now, Atlanta and New Orleans, they don't know what to do with Houston, which is where these games would be played in college football. They're getting 8 inches of snow. Pensacola, Florida has had more snow this winter than we have. That is unbelievable. That's a whole different story, but like 8.5 inches of snow in Pensacola, Florida. I think here in Iowa, we got like 1 inch tonight. It was snowing a little bit ago when I was driving home today. We've had like 4 inches of snow total. I haven't used my snowblower yet this year.
Yeah, we haven't had a lot, at least on the ground in Colorado Springs. I'm in Salt Lake City tonight, but at home it's been brutally cold, just like everywhere. But
yeah, it's cold. It's been cold.
We need more snow though. But yeah, I like games in the elements. That was a great game, and then of course, the final game of the weekend, Ravens, Bills. Lamar had a couple turnovers in the first half. I thought he played really well in the second. My biggest issue is the only people that could stop Derrick Henry was the Ravens, and that's exactly what they did. They took the ball up for some reason. Those 2-point conversions, Derrick Henry really got going there for a while. They couldn't stop him.
The 2-point conversion stuff is starting to drive me insane. If they just kick field goal every time, they kick a field goal to tie the game. They don't have to have the 2-point conversion. But they went for 2 earlier in the game because they were down 2 and stuff. Just kick field goals until you have to. You had to know you were going to score more points. You knew the initial, it wasn't enough. Everybody knew this. And it's starting to drive me nuts that they're going for 2 points in the first half or the second quarter, or it doesn't matter. Kick field goals until you have to have 2-point conversions. Now, NFL, I understand it's a little different. The extra point is not a gimme. Too many, and Houston, their kicker, that's one of the reasons they lost the game was a kicker. But you have to rely on 2-point conversions are hard. Scoring on the goal lines are hard because when you're designing an offense, your biggest advantage is space and spacing and getting matchups. Well, when you only have 12 yards to do that with 11 players, your spacing just isn't very good. And it's hard. And, everybody's really mad at Mark Andrews for dropping that play. Well, the pass wasn't great. I don't care what anybody says. Lamar short-armed it. No one wants to say that, but Lamar short-armed it. And honestly, the play that cost them the game was about a series and a half before that when he fumbled it, trying to do too many dance moves when he's a 6'6" white guy tight end. Go forward, get 2 yards, and fall forward instead of trying to go back 3 yards and make someone miss.
Mm-hmm.
That's what cost him the game. That's what people need to be mad at Mark Andrews about, not the drop 2-point conversion.
Yeah, the fumble was really bad. And yeah, Lamar had some mistakes, especially in the first half. I thought that the high snap, and then he caught the high snap, and then he tried to do too much. He admitted
he tried to do too much after that.
Yeah,
just go down,
put the ball on the ground. Yeah, in 2-point conversions, red zone, goal line, that is the toughest place to score because, like you said, the field shrinks. It's a lot tougher. So I do agree with you. There is a little bit too much going for 2 sometimes. But if you are going to do it, like I said, Derrick Henry, they could not stop him. And I think he only had 16 carries in the game. You brought him there for a reason. It's cold. Like it's cold out. Like just give it to that guy because they're not going to tackle him all game long. Especially because the Bills defense is a little undersized, and it was starting to show there for a little bit. And
yes, it was.
I think their offensive coordinator, like Ben Johnson, they get a little pass happy, and they want to show off. And sometimes you just need to hand the ball off. Keep it simple.
Especially, Derrick Henry is 250 pounds, whatever he is. Yeah, they're going to tackle him in the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. It's cold, windy. That fourth quarter should be Derrick Henry time. The Ravens are a better team than the Bills, but they were not better that night. And if I'm the Chiefs, I'm jumping up and down because I think the Ravens are really, really good. And they just Lamar can't do it. I mean, he played okay. He played all right. But again, like I said, he short-armed that pass for the 2-point conversion. Should have hit Mark Andrews in the chest, and he should have just fallen backwards for a touchdown. But the interception was awful. And again, on that high snap, obviously it wasn't his fault on the high snap. That was Linderbaum. But then he tried to do too much. You just got to fall on. You have to live to fight another day. You cannot turn the ball over in the playoffs. That was a big stat I saw with the Chiefs. They haven't turned the ball over in like a month and a half. When you don't turn the ball over, you're not going to lose very often.
No, the team that wins a turnover battle typically wins way more than they lose. And, I do agree with you. I think the Ravens are a better all-around team, but in my opinion, the Chiefs would rather face the Ravens than the Bills because Lamar always, and the Ravens as a whole, they always make these weird mistakes. Josh Allen, I think the Chiefs fear Josh Allen. He's the type of guy that can go head-to-head. I think in his 11 playoff games now or whatever it is that Josh has played in, I think he's got 30 touchdowns, only 4 turnovers. Like his stats are, and he went toe-to-toe with Mahomes in that game years ago. He had the lead, gave the ball back with 13. He did his job. Earlier this year, he beat the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs fear that one individual player more than
they fear him as much as Joe Burrow.
I think they fear, because I know Burrow's done it, but Josh Allen is just different. The running around and everything. But as far as like the Ravens go, I do think that they're a better team, but the Ravens always have these mistakes in the playoffs. A lot of times with Lamar, and the Bills the past year and a half, almost 2 years, they've really cut down on the turnovers. Josh Allen specifically too in the regular season. So I think it's going to be a really good game this coming weekend between those two teams.
Yeah, that's the early game though, right?
I believe so. I can't.
Why is that? I mean, why is that? Or is it just whatever the NFC was second this year?
It might have been something to do with the TV. Who gets what game? I'm pulling it up right now. Oh no, that is that's the night game. The Bills and
is it okay?
The Chiefs, yeah.
But it's like at 4:00, right? It's not.
It's 5:30 your time.
They don't have a night, I guess. Yeah, so they don't have the true Sunday night game like 7:00 or whatever.
5:30 start time for you, which it's 4:30 out here. I'm going to actually be in Reno, Nevada for the game on Sunday, so it'll be at 3:30, which I'm okay with because game will get over early enough, get to bed, don't have to stay up all night. But the early game is going to start at 11 a.m. though out in Reno, so I'll be checking out of one hotel, waiting to check in another. So I'll probably go to a sports book there and watch that one, make a few bets.
That'll be good. Going to go to Tahoe at all?
No, I probably am not going to have time. Actually, maybe on Saturday I'll drive down there just to look around. But Sunday I'll be watching football, and then Monday through the rest of the week I got a show going on. So
Yeah, you are in show season now, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, 11 a.m. playoff game will be a little bit different.
It's not all bad.
No, I'm going to be up anyway. So
yeah, no, good. All right, let's transition to college. Ohio State wins the national championship. Ended up being close, but it really wasn't. They're the best team. Wasn't really particularly close throughout the playoffs. Whatever Ryan Day did or did not do after that Michigan game, it worked. A lot of people think they were lucky to get in, and I agree with that. I mean, there was some argument that they could have went another way, but you saw what $20 million and the best roster can do when they decide to play. I think Chip Kelly and Ryan Day went into that Michigan game with just the wrong game plan, I think, and then a couple bad things happened. Is one reason they lost. Then obviously they lost by 1 point they had a chance there against Oregon. So they're the best team. The Big Ten was unbelievable just in general this year. Penn State proved that they're a top 5 team. They weren't national championship good, but I do think they're one of the best 5 teams in the country. And then Oregon, you can say whatever you want. I think they are too. I'd like to see them play anybody else besides Ohio State, and they probably win that football game. And I know Dan Lanning and Oregon would love to have that game back in general because I believe they think they can beat Ohio State. They proved it earlier in the year, but whatever they did, they want to do over as well.
Yeah, it's been a good couple of years for the Big Ten. I think the biggest thing, my takeaway is the expanded playoff worked, and the thing I like most about it is you're allowed to have a bad game or two and not be punished for it. Back in the old days, they used to vote on
certain teams are allowed to have a bad game or two. That's my argument. Certain teams are, not everybody.
No, and that's the way it should be because we know most programs can't compete anyway. Ohio State, but some of these teams are allowed to have. The NFL, you can lose 7, 8, 9 games and still make the playoffs. Right. College is different, of course, but I do think it's better. You're allowed to at least have one loss and still be in contention for a 12-team playoff, and it's probably going to go to 14 here at some point. But, if you're in the SEC, the Big Ten, ACC, or Big 12, you can lose a game and still have a chance to get in. When they used to just have the BCS National Championship, you were probably out in a lot of years. And when it was the old 4-team playoff, there was a lot of years you probably didn't make it either. Yep. The Final Four this year, 2 of those 4 Final Four teams this year wouldn't have made.
Nope. Ohio State would have been out.
Because we know it would have been Oregon and Georgia for sure. And then 2 more teams.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably. I don't even know who it would have been. I mean.
They probably would have favored Texas, maybe. SEC school.
Yeah, Texas would have been in, but it does make it. It's just like, Iowa State, and we're going to talk about basketball here coming up, but, Iowa State lost at West Virginia, and some people are losing their mind. Like, they weren't going to go 20-0 in the Big 12. They weren't. Right. It's just, you're going to lose sometime. You might as well lose on the road against hostile environment. They had everything set up for you. Jerry West did a day. Everything was stacked up against you. And you played a horrible game. And until the last minute and a half where it got out of hand, you had a chance. That's all you can ask for. And you went 1 for 17 from 3-point line. You had the perfect recipe to lose a basketball game. Then you come back and score 108. It's like, it'll be all right. They're still, you're guess what? You're going to lose again. And just fans get out of whack, and we're conditioned, people our age, where you lose a regular season football game, you should be out. You're done. Only undefeated teams or maybe one loss at the end of the year get you in. That's what we're conditioned to see and do. So now when teams lose and still get in, we're like, well, that's not right.
Yeah, in my opinion, it's the way it should be, though, because college football is the only sport of the major ones that doesn't have a tournament. The pro sports have a playoff or a tournament. All the college sports have a playoff or a tournament. But college football was the only one where we're asking 18 to 21-year-olds, you have to be perfect. You can't have a slip up, or you don't get a chance to compete for a title. Now you do. And as far as some like you said, some schools can lose a game or two, more specifically 2, and still get in until they can get. The NFL's got AFC, NFC in the divisions, so it's set up perfect. College is never going to be that way because there's too many teams. So I don't think it's ever going to be perfect. But we've talked about it before. I do think all the major conferences need to play 9 conference games. Yep. Then you get one cupcake. So Alabama gets a Mercer or Citadel, whoever they want. And then you have to schedule 2 real opponents. So Alabama can't schedule, Jacksonville State or someone. They have to go schedule Syracuse and then a Texas Tech. And one of them has to be on the road. You can't get both at home. And if you do that for all the conferences, that sort of levels it out a little. It's not perfect, but it helps.
Yeah, they almost need to make everybody should play the same number of conference games. So that's 9. Mm-hmm. If you don't do that, everybody needs to play the same number of Power 4-ish teams. Mm-hmm. That's what it needs to be. 11 of your 12 games has to be Power 4. Then you could make another argument on so many on the road, so many at home, whatever. Mm-hmm. But if you're not going to do 9 conference games, then none of this. And then I think that one thing is I don't care that Alabama plays Mercer. They want to do it, but it needs to be in September, not November.
Yeah,
like everybody else.
Yeah, that'd be nice too. Like for Iowa, you can play Ball State, but you only get one of those.
Yeah.
You don't get 2. Right. You just get one.
And Iowa State, they're playing 9, and then they play each other.
Yeah,
and then they get 2 cupcakes.
Yep. So that takes care of that. But the college playoff was good overall. I'm glad it's at 12. Yep. Ohio State, they had a gauntlet they had to go through, and we've talked about it. They'll get the seeding figured out. It looked good on paper. It didn't work out so well. They've got to figure out the seeding. But once they do that, I think it's going to be even better.
They met this week, the committee that I'm going to do quotation marks and
where'd they meet at?
Who knows? But they went to a nice dinner at wherever. They had their committee, and Mike Leach is up there dancing over on his grave, just making fun of him. And they discussed things, but they had to have unanimous support from the conferences to change anything for this upcoming year. And it did not pass, which makes 100% sense. I mean, the Big 12 and ACC for these 2 years, and the Group of 5, which is another one, they don't want anything to change. Group of 5 got exactly what they wanted. They got a bye out of their team. It was perfect. They couldn't have asked for anything better. Mm-hmm. So they're not going to want anything to change. Now, I do think they need to probably just – the committee ranks the teams, and that's the seed. Mm-hmm. But it's not all the committee's fault either. When this was designed, there was 5 teams. There was 5 conferences. That's not their fault either. I mean, that was some of it, the hand they were dealt. Mm-hmm. And then, Boise State did what they did with only losing 1 game, and it was on the road to the number 1 team in the country. And all of a sudden you're like, well, what do we do with that? Mm-hmm. But I do think they just need to rank them 1 through 12 or 14 or 16, whatever you end up being. And then that's the seed. And then I think you need to go, the next thing would be 1 more round of home games. I do think you're not guaranteed home games, but you're guaranteed spots. Like, the Big 12 is guaranteed a spot. The ACC is guaranteed a spot. And I could even say guaranteed a home game. That would be even a bigger step. Kind of like, well, that's what the NFL does. Mm-hmm. Minnesota was, if you ranked them, would be like 3 or 4 in the country in the NFL, but they had to go on the road because they didn't win their division. It's the same thing. It's kind of what happened in college football. So there's tweaks that need to happen, and I think everybody understands it. I did see that the 29 championship moved from Dallas to Miami. I mean, I don't care. It doesn't matter, but I just wonder why. I don't know why Jerry Jones would want to give up a national championship game.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't even hear that, but no, I think most everybody, that's something that everybody agrees on with college football. Got to figure out the seeding, but I do agree if you win your conference, you should get a spot in the tournament no matter what. But then after that, the committee seeds it 1 through 12 or whatever the number is going to be. They'll get it. They'll get that straightened out. I think everybody's in agreement. I don't think there's going to be any pushback on that when they can change it.
No, I mean the biggest issue and the biggest, and I don't know, you kind of go to different areas. There was no buzz about this game. This was Ohio State and Notre Dame playing for a national championship. Two of the bluest of blue bloods, two of the biggest fan bases in the country, and no one was talking about this. And here is my reason why. And I want to see if you agree with this. Because the game's on ESPN, and ESPN doesn't have any rights to Ohio State or Notre Dame. So why would they promote something that they're going to get one game at, but going into next year, you're never going to get an Ohio State or Notre Dame game on your network until the playoffs again.
There was a decent amount of buzz out west, but yeah, ESPN being with the SEC, those type of things. I haven't even looked at what the ratings were for the game. I don't know if you saw. I have to imagine it was high. ESPN's going to look out for themselves. We know that, and all networks are. That's how they operate.
Yeah, I mean, if NBC had the national championship game, it would have been all Notre Dame. It'd have been. I'm watching Peacock right now. They'd still be talking about it.
Yeah, no, they definitely would. Just speaking of the game, I know we really didn't talk about the game. I was happy that Notre Dame did come back a little bit there at the end when they scored and they were down 8. I think it was 8, and Ohio State got the ball back. I was sure, just like a lot of people, I'm like, all right, get a stop. Come on, get a stop. I'd at least like to see if they can go down and tie it. But the best player in that game obviously makes a big catch and a great throw too. Will Howard's definitely helped himself with his draft stock. So that first drive though by Notre Dame was pretty impressive. I was liking that. I'm like, man, I obviously figured they probably couldn't.
They spent too much energy doing that though. I mean, unfortunately, it was just too hard. It was perfect. It's exactly what you wanted to do, but it just took so much energy. They were gassed. And they didn't get another first down for like a quarter and a half. Now, who would have thought this? Now, and it's great, but it's sad in the same thing. Just as a college football fan that's loved the sport for, I'm 45 years old, for 40 years since I can remember, loved college football. Last year, the Kansas State quarterback and the Duke quarterback were playing for a national championship. So, and they weren't first-team All-Americans. They weren't first-team all-conference players. But they go and they win. They get to the national championship game. And then Will Howard, the last game he played at Kansas State, Abu Sama ran for 275 yards against him in the snow. And neither one of them are 5-star quarterbacks. Those two teams can recruit 5-star quarterbacks. They can recruit everybody they want, but they still don't hit all the time, and they got to go find their guys. And it's great and horrible for college football that happened, in my opinion. Because I'd love to see those two quarterbacks still at Duke and Kansas State. But Duke or Kansas State, even with those two quarterbacks, aren't playing in the national championship game. So you love it for those guys because they get that opportunity. But it sucks for college football in general, in my opinion. Because
there's two ways to look at it.
Kansas State and Duke both would have been way better football teams this year if those guys stayed.
Yeah, it depends how you look at it. I mean, we've seen more upsets this year than ever, though, too. So we're going to find out in 3, 5, 10 years from now if the parity in college football spreads out a little bit with the transfer portal and NIL. It sounds like there's going to be some collectives going around where teams may have similar amounts of quote-unquote cap space type of deal. There's two ways to look at it.
everybody's going to spend $20.4 million through the school, and then the collective is going to kick in for everything else. It's still going to go. It's still going to be the haves and haves nots, but it's not ever changed. I mean, what Alabama and Michigan and Ohio State and Nebraska did in the 70s and 80s was no different than what they're doing today. It's just now it's out in front of everybody. Until there was 85 scholarships, Nebraska would put 200 kids on scholarships. And Miami did it, and Oklahoma did it, and Texas did it, and because there was no rules. And then teams like Iowa State did not, and they fell way behind, and they just weren't even competitive. And that's what's happening now. That's why parity is happening, because now that Alabama 4-string guy that was a 5-star recruit that sat for 2 years, well, now he doesn't sit for 2 years. Mm-hmm. He's out after 1 year. As soon as he realizes he's not playing, he's out. So now he does go play at Iowa State, Ole Miss, Missouri, Kansas State, whatever you want to say, and it gives them a chance.
Yeah, it's spreading out the talent throughout the country. It's still the haves and the have-nots. I mean, I'm sure the next 10 national title winners are all going to be the normal schools that we think of. I don't know if there's going to be a surprise school. You know, you wonder if maybe Arizona State could be it with their quarterback coming back and the coach. But I would assume the next 10 are going to be the normal schools like we always think of. But if we get some upsets in this 12-team playoff or whatever it is, I do think it makes it more exciting, though.
Yeah, we didn't really get an upset this year, right?
No, I mean we did get Notre Dame over Georgia.
Yeah.
You know, I mean most years,
right.
Georgia's going to win
that was number 2 versus. I mean, I'm looking at the rankings, not necessarily the seeding. That was number 2 versus number 4, right? I mean,
yeah. So, I think most years people would 95% of the time Georgia's going to win that game.
Yeah,
but yeah, the quarterback and Notre Dame put it. You know, they only had 1 5-star recruit, so what they did this year was really impressive. I thought if Notre Dame could have pulled the upset in the title game, I thought it would have been the most important win for college football, since 2000, because it would have showed that you can do it without all the 5 stars and 4 stars. Even though Notre Dame does have a lot of talent, given their academics, they're never going to have the talent of Ohio State or some of these other schools.
No. Right. Agreed. All right, we're well over an hour, and that's fine. We're going to go a little longer here. I do want to talk Hawkeyes and Cyclones. We kind of touched on the Cyclones. Let's talk Cyclones real quick, and then I want to have a little bit of a conversation here about the Hawkeyes. Iowa State last night scored 108 points, most points like in 100 years. Not really, but forever. It scored 57 the other night at West Virginia. They lost. They only dropped to 1 spot. So, everybody knew it is what it is. You're going to lose a game. You just can't let 1 loss turn into 2. And they did that. They came back, won by 25 or whatever. Did exactly what they needed to do. We just got to weather the storm and try to get Momcilovic back in 4 to 6 weeks. Kind of a big weekend. They play at Arizona State on Saturday. And then big Monday starts now that football's over at Arizona, which obviously is one of the blue bloods of college basketball and right at the top of the conference. So a big game there. So really nothing about Iowa State that's anything besides you're a top 5 team. Keep playing like it. Keep everybody healthy as you can. Win every home game, beat who you're supposed to when it's a toss-up on the road. Hopefully you're in it. You can make a shot like you did at Texas Tech. It didn't go your way at West Virginia. As long as you don't lose 5 more games, you're probably right in a 1, maybe a 2 seed, and everything's all right. Now, Hawkeyes go on the road last week, lose to USC and UCLA in, I'm just going to say it, horrible effort games. And then you come home to the worst team in the Big Ten, 7.5-point favorite. Ends up being relatively close because you made a rally at the end, which is all you ever do. Something has to change for the Hawkeyes. Hawkeye friends, Hawkeye podcast, Hawkeye radio talk show host. I think everybody's in agreement. How do we get away from Fran? He's owed like $12 million. Does he walk away? Do you make agreement? Hey, we'll pay you $9 million. You go. If I'm Fran, it's $6 million a year to still coach. That's a lot of money. You fire me, I'll take my $12 million. Is it worth that to try to get somebody new? My biggest thing is it looks like Fran's checked out. One of the best people I ever follow on Twitter was Fran's red face. I loved it. And it was funny. It was hilarious. He's not really that bad. I mean, he'd go nuts, but he stands his hands in his pocket and looks like he doesn't care. And I don't know if he's just getting older or he's checked out. That's the baffling part to me. Or maybe, Barta didn't care, but maybe Beth Getz said, you can't do that anymore. Just like whipped him. Now he's like a dog that just sits there. I don't know. But he has definitely changed. And that's what's weird to me. He's never been a great defensive coach. They've always scored a lot. He's not done bad enough to get fired, in my opinion. He goes to the tournament almost every year. Not every year, but almost every year. Going into last night's game at Minnesota, against Minnesota, was at home, Lenardi had him in the tournament still. As bad as they'd been, they're still in the tournament. So they're still on the bubble. But I think it's reached the point of no return. Announced attendance last night was 8,000. That's paid tickets. Real numbers was like 2,500 is what I've been told and seen with pictures. It was talked about on the radio and everything. 2,500 people watching a Big Ten game in Carver Hawkeye Arena. That is, if you're Beth Getz, you got to start making a plan. This is going to be your biggest hire yet. You had to make a pretty good hire when Lisa Bluter retired, but the way her timing and everything was, I believe she forced her hand into giving Jan Jensen the job, and rightfully so. Now that's a different conversation. They lost 5 in a row going into. They did win tonight, but Beth Getz has a tough decision to make. I actually don't think it's tough. It's how you're going to do it. Are you going to fire him, or is it going to be a mutual parting of ways? That's your two options. But it was much like, now, unfortunately, it's not like the end of the Steve Prohm era, because they went 0-19 in the conference, so it was just obvious. Iowa's not that bad, but they're not that good either. And you've had the National Player of the Year. You've had first-team All-Americans. You've had high draft picks, and you still can't go anywhere in the tournament. Iowa State's had 3 coaches get to the Sweet 16 since Fran's been at Iowa.
Yeah, I wish Zach would have been on tonight.
Yeah, I do too.
I can't pay any
attention
to Iowa basketball, the men's side. I just with Fran there, I've checked out a couple years ago. If I'm going to spend time watching average to below average sporting events, I'll just go watch a TV show or music videos or something. So I really don't even care about Iowa men's basketball. I haven't for a couple years. That obviously is not changing. I know Fran resurrected the program from the dead, though. He does deserve credit for that. But everything I've been seeing and reading is, it seems like he's checked out. It does feel like it's way past time for a change, a new coach to come in. Like I said, Fran's done some really good things, but I don't even care about Iowa men's basketball. I mean, I don't really have anything to say other than that. I just don't waste my time with them.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is you just don't care. It's apathy. It's, how this is going to end. They're going to be on the bubble. They get in. They're going to lose in the first round. If not, they win a game and then they're losing the next game. They're not going any. This isn't a team that can go far into the tournament. They don't play good enough. You have to play a little bit of defense. Now, there's times where you got to score, and they're as good as anybody at scoring. But, yeah, I do wish Zach was joining us here, and maybe Zach and I can do sometime a little bit more in depth on Hawkeye, especially if they would happen to lose a game or two more. And I just want his perspective. I mean, I just think Fran's just so different. And when you watch him on the sideline, he's just so different. That's what baffles me. What's changed? Is it just him? Was he told to change? Barta kind of let everybody do whatever they wanted to do. I do see Beth Getz being a little bit more, we're doing it this way. Just in general. I just see that more. I could be way off in that.
Yeah, she may have told him something. You could be right because, Fran has always been very emotional. We know that. I mean, he's one of the most emotional basketball coaches there is out there.
Yeah.
So for him to completely change. So, something's had to happen. He's either checked out. He was either told maybe we could get Zach on next week because obviously we'll only have the 2 football games to talk about. And then, the following week we can do our Super Bowl previews. So hopefully Zach could get on next week to give us more of his thoughts, or maybe Tassel could on the men's side. Just real quick on the Iowa women, Sydney Afalter last game kind of went off. She had a double-double. They ended up losing, but I hadn't seen her stat line tonight. I know because we've been doing this, and I'd been running around before, but they had to get a victory. I'm interested to see how Sydney played because somebody's got to take control of this team. And the thing that made me the most bad was the Nebraska game that they lost recently. Lucy goes 1 for 6 in the fourth quarter from the free throw line. She's laughing about it. They pan over to the bench. You've got experienced starters laughing on the bench. It's like you're about to lose your 4th game in a row. I think it was, or 5th, to one of your biggest rivals, Nebraska, and you've got people laughing on the sideline. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting old, but I didn't like that at all. That ticked me off a little bit. And, they're at a breaking point right now. This win's good, but they've got to get a lot more.
The biggest thing, I don't know exactly how Falter did. McCabe, just the team in general started 8 of 8 or 9 for 9 from 3-point line. Obviously, that's unbelievable. But McCabe hit 3 or 4 right away.
Yeah, I think they need to be a little bit more aggressive shooting. It seems like we talked about this a while back. The starters, the more experienced players, they play slower and more methodical. It seems like they're really trying to feed the ball down low, which is, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's one way to do it. But I haven't seen Sydney and Kylie shooting threes like we saw last year. And I think maybe we do need to get back to that a little bit. We'll see if that helps, the rest of the season. But they started out good. They've really hit a slump. Now you just hope that they could rebound and do well to end the season, hopefully do well in the Big Ten tournament, and then, of course, make the March Madness.
Yeah. All right. Anything else, Trev? Yeah, we'll next week recap. Obviously, the 2 championship games. We really won't have anything preview for football. We'll probably talk about it a little bit, but and then obviously we'll have Iowa State basketball, men and women, and we'll try to get Zach on here and have us all 3 discuss a few things and everything. So, anything else, Trev?
No, not that I can think of. I think that's good for this week.
You're gonna go skiing out there? You're in Salt Lake, Reno?
No,
Reno, you're not going to ski in Reno, but
I think you can.
Are you a skier? Do you ski?
No, it's not really my thing. I've been snowboarding a couple of times. I mean, very on the low end level. So I probably should do some more of that. But Reno, I'm going to get there Friday, afternoon, and then on Saturday I'm just going to go do some sightseeing. So I may go down to Lake Tahoe, or I may go find some stuff to do. But I've been there before. It's a pretty area. I'm going to be there for, I don't know, like six nights in a row.
Oh.
So
you're going to have time to search it out a little bit.
I'll have some time. I'll be, during the day, I'll be at the show in the week, but then after, I'm sure I'll go play some 1-2 no limit poker and maybe make a few sports bets and, stuff like that.
Yeah. No, awesome. All right. We'll talk and we'll figure out times and everything next week and we'll go from there. But thanks a lot, Trev, and we'll talk to you next week.
All righty. Have a good night.